Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when America's most recognizable food show, Powerhouse, walks onto a daytime talk show expecting to chat about barbecue, small businesses, and his latest road trip series, and instead finds himself dragged into one of the most politically loaded debates of the decade? That's exactly what happened when Guy Fieri joined The View, ready to bring laughs and talk comfort food, only to get pulled headfirst into a tense showdown with Joy Behar over one explosive question. Is climate change accelerating faster than Americans are willing to admit? At first, it felt like any other lighthearted visit. Guy joked about diners he'd visited, the wildest meals he'd tasted, and what it's like running restaurants in different parts of the country. The audience loved it. But then Joy leaned forward, changed her tone, and asked a question Guy clearly hadn't expected. She wanted to know why someone with his platform wasn't speaking up more loudly about climate issues that affect farmers, restaurant owners, and food supply chains. The shift was instant. Guy's smile tightened, the pale sensed the tension building, and what started as a casual conversation flipped into a fiery back and forth neither one backed away from. Within minutes, the studio air turned sharp, the crowd reacted, social media lit up, and Guy Fieri, the man known for bold flavors, found himself serving up one of the boldest exchanges daytime TV has seen all year.
The episode opened with the familiar buzz that always hits The View when a big-name guest is about to walk out. The audience was already cheering before Guy Fieri even stepped onto the set, because honestly, the man carries the exact kind of energy this show desperately needs once in a while. Loud shirt, bigger smile, sunglasses on his head like he came straight from a convertible parked outside the studio. Joy Behar grinned as he walked in, waving both arms like he was entering a backyard cookout instead of a live national broadcast. "Welcome to The View, Guy. How's Flavortown today?" she said, leaning back in her chair. Guy laughed, that deep, rolling laugh the entire country knows. "Flavortown is thriving," he said. "I mean, I had a breakfast burrito bigger than my head this morning, so I'm doing great." The audience cracked up. Even Sonny, who usually stays reserved when guests come in loud, was smiling. Guy had that effect on people. He could talk about anything from ribs to ranch dressing and somehow make the whole room feel like old friends catching up in someone's kitchen. Joy kicked things off with easy questions. His latest road trip series, the small-town joints he'd found that were still hanging on after inflation, the old-school diners run by grandmas who refused to let their recipes die. Guy spoke with enthusiasm, hands waving, voice punctuated with the kind of excitement that only comes from someone who genuinely loves what they do. "Do you ever get tired?" Whoopi asked at one point. "Tired?" Guy laughed. "I'm running on caffeine, good vibes, and questionable life choices. I'm unstoppable." The crowd roared again. Everything felt light, warm, almost nostalgic. The kind of segment producers pray for because it keeps their stress levels under control for at least 7 minutes. Joy leaned in, smirking. "Guy, you've got fans across the country. My husband watches your show more religiously than he watches me, and I'm a little offended." Guy put his hand on his heart. "Tell him I appreciate the loyalty, but you're going to have to step up your game, Joy." More laughter. The man knew exactly how to play the room. Then Joy brought up farmers. "You travel all over. You see firsthand how tough it is for food producers these days. What's the vibe out there?" Guy softened a bit. "A lot of these folks are fighting every day to keep things going. Weather issues, supply chain problems, rising costs, but they're tough. They care. You can't run a farm without heart." Joy nodded slowly, keeping her expression neutral in that way she does, right before her brain wheels make a sharp turn. But for now, she let him continue with cheerful stories about small business owners, homemade pies, and the kindness he sees on the road. Sonny asked about the community support he's offered during wildfires. Guy spoke modestly, brushing it off like it wasn't a huge deal, even though everyone on the panel knew he'd fed thousands of firefighters. "Heroes deserve a hot meal," he said simply. "That's just being human." It was all wholesome, charming, down to earth. The kind of segment where even social media trolls would struggle to find something offensive. But then Joy shifted in her chair, straightened her notes. looked up at him with a different kind of focus. Producers in the control room probably felt their stomachs drop. Guy didn't notice. He was mid-story about a barbecue pitmaster in Kansas City. Joy waited for him to finish, smiled politely, then asked the question that would crack the afternoon open like an overfilled pressure cooker. And that's where the warmth began to fade. Replaced by the first sparks of a storm, neither of them would walk away unscathed.
The temperature in the studio rose the moment Joy pushed back her chair and settled into a posture that told everyone she was done playing nice. Guy stayed relaxed at first, leaning back, one foot hooked over the other, like he was still chatting from behind the counter of a diner in Tennessee. But his eyes sharpened as Joy pressed deeper into the topic. She started with statistics, rising ocean temperatures, record heat waves, flooding patterns changing faster than meteorologists can track. Guy listened politely, nodding here and there, but the second she suggested that celebrity chefs might be comfortable ignoring the bigger picture, his head snapped up. "Hold on, that's not fair," he said. Joy crossed her arms. "I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm trying to be direct." Sunny raised an eyebrow, sensing the energy shift. Sarah shifted in her chair. Even Whoopi, who had seen more heated segments than most hosts ever would, leaned in. Guy held his ground. "I run restaurants in towns that get hit hard by storms. I talk to farmers struggling with drought. I see the impact every day. But I'm not a climatologist. My job is feeding people and keeping small businesses alive." Joy didn't let go. "But you influence people. Millions listen when you talk about food. You spotlight communities. You're telling me you can't use that same spotlight to push folks towards sustainability?" Guy opened his hands. "I talk about it. I've supported composting programs. I've pushed for energy-efficient kitchens. I'm doing the work." Joy shook her head. "Not loudly enough." Guy gave a short laugh that wasn't amused. "So now you decide the volume? You're acting like any celebrity who doesn't get on a soapbox is the villain." The audience murmured. The tension sharpened another notch. Joy leaned forward. "Guy, the planet is heating up. Farmers are losing crops. Look at the fires in the West. Look at what's happening to coastal towns. We need people with reach. You have reach." Guy's voice rose. "And I'm using it. Maybe not in the way you want, but I'm using it. I'm out there helping with disaster relief, cooking for firefighters, supporting families that lost everything in floods. Sometimes action matters more than speeches." Joy held on to her point. "I respect that, but people listen to you. They eat what you tell them to eat. Why not help them understand what's happening to the world that produces the food you love? Why not fight a little harder for the folks who grow it?" Guy's jaw tightened. "You think I'm not fighting? You think because I don't go on Instagram and yell about climate policy, I don't care? My whole life is wrapped around this issue, whether I like it or not." The studio was silent, waiting. Joy stayed calm. "I'm not attacking you. I'm asking you to rise to the moment. If we don't talk about what's coming, we won't be ready for it." Guy took a slow breath. "And I'm telling you, I'm doing the work in my own way." Sunny jumped in gently, trying to cool things down. "Maybe there's space for both approaches." But Joy wasn't done. "I think silence from influential people is part of the problem." Guy straightened. "I'm not silent. I just don't broadcast everything I do for praise. That's the difference." The crowd reacted again, sensing the sting behind his words. Denials were gone. Humor was gone. The friendly diner talk was long behind them. The conversation had turned into a full clash, and both of them knew it. The tension had been brewing for a while, but no one in the studio expected it to flip so quickly. Guy leaned back, crossed his arms, and let out a low breath as Joy pushed forward again, this time with sharper intent. "Here's what I don't get," Joy said. "You're a public figure. You know your fans listen to you. Don't you think it's irresponsible to say climate change is just some political fight?" Guy tilted his head. "See, that's where you keep twisting my point. I never said it's fake. I never said it's not happening.
I said regular folks don't want to be lectured by people who fly around on private jets telling the rest of us to recycle our soda cans." The audience reacted with a mix of laughter and groans. Joy wasn't amused. "Guy, this isn't about soda cans," she said. "This is about policy, action, urgency. People are losing homes to floods, fires, heat waves, and you're saying the real problem is tone?" Guy leaned in. "Tone can lose people. You ever tried talking to a firefighter about climate change while he's working a double shift? He'll tell you the same thing. Folks feel overwhelmed and blamed." "But people need to be pushed," Joy snapped. "No, people need to be brought in, not shoved." Sunny raised her hands, trying to break in, but the two were locked in. "You know what this sounds like?" Joy said, squinting. "It sounds like you're downplaying the urgency because you don't want to upset anyone. That's not leadership." Guy's jaw tightened. "And it sounds like you want to shame half the country into submission. That's not leadership either." Denials, reactions, small laughs. The room was simmering. Then Guy made it more personal. "You talk about responsibility. Here's mine. I run kitchens, big ones. You know what happens when the power grid's strained? Food spoils, workers go home early, families lose money, restaurants are already on the edge. You want them to carry the cost of every new environmental rule that gets drafted without even talking to the people who have to pay for it?" Joy shot back instantly. "But without action, we'll pay 10 times more in disasters." "Then talk to the people who live through those disasters, not celebrities, not politicians, real folks." Joy didn't let up. "You're a celebrity, Guy." "And you're not," he said, almost laughing. She didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned forward in that way she does when she's about to go for the throat. "You keep saying people feel attacked, but maybe they should feel uncomfortable if we're heading toward catastrophe." Guy stared at her for a long moment, and the room went still. "Uncomfortable?" he said quietly. "Joy, people are already uncomfortable. They're trying to pay bills, keep their kids safe, keep their homes running. You want to add fear on top of that? That's not activism, that's panic." "No, that's reality," Joy said. "It's your version of reality." The studio audience gasped so loudly that the producers flinched. Joy's tone changed. It sharpened. "Are you implying the science is optional?" Guy didn't blink. "I'm saying the messaging is broken, and people like you are part of why it's broken." That was it. That was the moment. Joy's expression hardened. She wasn't just debating anymore. She was offended. The panel went silent. Even Anna stopped shifting in her seat. "People like me?" Joy repeated slowly. "What does that mean?" "It means," Guy chose every word carefully, "you talk at people, not to them." It hit her. Hard. She straightened in her chair, eyes locked on his. "Then maybe you're the one not listening." Guy didn't look away. "I am listening. I just don't agree." The room froze in place, no one moving, no one breathing. The cameras were rolling, but the energy had flipped from heated to something closer to explosive. And the worst part? Both of them knew they had crossed into territory neither could easily walk back from.
The tension in the studio thickened the moment they came back from commercial. Guy leaned forward with his elbows on the table, fingers laced together like he was bracing himself. Joy sat stiff, jaw tight, eyes locked on him as if she was preparing for round 4. Whoopi glanced between them with the look of someone silently praying for a meteor to land outside and save her from moderating. Guy started first. "Look," he said, steady but clearly done being polite. "I'm not trying to disrespect scientists. I'm saying ordinary people need to feel like they're part of the solution. And right now, most folks feel like the finger's pointed at them while the big polluters get a slap on the wrist. You tell a guy working a double shift he needs to buy an electric car, he'll laugh at you." Joy didn't wait a second. "No one is telling him that. We're telling you, as someone with a platform, not to downplay the crisis. That's the problem. Celebrities want to talk about relatability while the planet burns." Guy's face tightened. Joy, you're twisting what I'm saying. Am I, or are you avoiding the real issue? She shot back. The audience murmured again. Denise and Sarah exchanged a look that said, "Here we go." Guy held out a hand, but it wasn't a calming gesture. It was frustration, barely disguised. You want the real issue? Fine. The real issue is that people don't trust institutions anymore. They hear climate reports and think it's just another thing politicians will use to control them. And you sitting there acting like they're dumb doesn't help. Joy's eyebrows shot up. I didn't say they were dumb. You implied it, Guy answered, his voice sharper now. You always talk like the public is clueless and needs you to explain the world. Joy leaned in, nostrils flaring slightly. I talk like someone who actually listens to experts. Guy replied instantly. Experts who told us 30 years ago we had 10 years left. Oh, here we go, Joy muttered. The old scientists are always wrong shtick. It's not shtick, it's reality. Predictions shift, models shift, and people see that and stop believing. Joy threw her hands up. So what? We ignore the warnings because they're not perfect? Guy stared at her a long moment before answering. We stop yelling at people and start fixing systems. That's what I want. For a moment, the table went unusually quiet. It should have been the end of the exchange, but Joy wasn't done. You know what I think? She said, voice low but cutting. I think you...
The tension in the studio thickened the moment they came back from commercial. Guy leaned forward with his elbows on the table, fingers laced together like he was bracing himself. Joy sat stiff, jaw tight, eyes locked on him as if she was preparing for round 4. Whoopi glanced between them with the look of someone silently praying for a meteor to land outside and save her from moderating. Guy started first. Look, he said, steady but clearly done being polite. I'm not trying to disrespect scientists. I'm saying ordinary people need to feel like they're part of the solution. And right now, most folks feel like the finger's pointed at them while the big polluters get a slap on the wrist. You tell a guy working a double shift he needs to buy an electric car, he'll laugh at you. Joy didn't wait a second. No one is telling him that. We're telling you, as someone with a platform, not to downplay the crisis. That's the problem. Celebrities want to talk about relatability while the planet burns. Guy's face tightened. Joy, you're twisting what I'm saying. Am I, or are you avoiding the real issue? She shot back. The audience murmured again. Denise and Sarah exchanged a look that said, "Here we go." Guy held out a hand, but it wasn't a calming gesture. It was frustration, barely disguised. You want the real issue? Fine. The real issue is that people don't trust institutions anymore. They hear climate reports and think it's just another thing politicians will use to control them. And you sitting there acting like they're dumb doesn't help. Joy's eyebrows shot up. I didn't say they were dumb. You implied it, Guy answered, his voice sharper now. You always talk like the public is clueless and needs you to explain the world. Joy leaned in, nostrils flaring slightly. I talk like someone who actually listens to experts. Guy replied instantly, experts who told us 30 years ago we had 10 years left? Oh, here we go, Joy muttered. The old scientists are always wrong shtick. It's not shtick, it's reality. Predictions shift, models shift, and people see that and stop believing. Joy threw her hands up. So what? We ignore the warnings because they're not perfect? Guy stared at her a long moment before answering. We stop yelling at people and start fixing systems. That's what I want. For a moment, the table went unusually quiet. It should have been the end of the exchange, but Joy wasn't done. You know what I think? She said, voice low but cutting. You want to sound reasonable, but you're hedging. You're trying to play both sides. You want to say climate change matters, but you also want to keep your fans happy by acting like it's exaggerated. Guy froze. She hit the nerve square on. That's not true, but he said it with heat now. Isn't it? She pressed. Guy straightened, shoulders squared like someone pushed him 1 inch too far. Let me make this clear. I don't pander. I don't pretend. I care about this planet because I've spent half my life outdoors filming, cooking, meeting people who rely on the land. Don't you dare say I'm playing games." Joy lifted her chin. "Then stop muddying the water for people watching." Guy stared at her, and the silence that followed was heavier than any argument before it. He looked like he wanted to say something sharp, something final, but instead he exhaled slowly, shook his head, and pushed back from the table. "Maybe I'm at the wrong table," he said quietly, and the studio erupted. Cameras caught the glance he exchanged with a producer off stage. It wasn't quite a request, but it was close. Joy, caught off guard for the first time, opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. The atmosphere shifted into something electric, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. They had just hit the breaking point. When the dust finally settled, the studio felt almost hollow, as if every ounce of energy had been drained out of it. Guy wasn't angry anymore. He looked tired, not defeated, just worn from carrying the weight of something bigger than a cooking segment gone sideways. Joy stood a few feet away, arms crossed, still defensive, but quieter than she'd been all morning. Even the audience stayed still, unsure if they were supposed to clap, react, or just absorb what they had witnessed. Guy finally broke the silence. His voice wasn't sharp, it wasn't even annoyed. It was steady and plain. He said he didn't wake up planning to fight with anyone. He wasn't trying to win an argument or embarrass a host. He was frustrated because he sees what's happening to people who never had much to begin with. He said the country doesn't need perfect speeches about climate change. It needs small towns that aren't drowning, burned out, priced out, or forgotten. Joy let out a slow breath. For the first time since the debate began, she dropped the sarcasm. She said she wasn't trying to shut him down. She just didn't want misinformation to slip through, especially on live TV. She admitted the topic brings out the worst in everyone because it affects everything. It's not just politics. It's daily life. It's the bill your neighbor can't pay. It's the gas station that keeps raising numbers. It's your kid asking why the sky looks strange this week. Guy nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't push back. He just said maybe the country would get further if people stopped assuming the worst about each other before the conversation even starts. The audience finally applauded. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was the kind of applause that comes from understanding something important just hit the room. Guy stood up to leave. Joy thanked him, and he thanked her back. No one pretended they agreed. No one pretended they solved anything. But they managed to end the hour without bitterness. And on daytime TV, sometimes that's the closest thing to progress anyone sees. As Guy walked off stage, the cameras caught one last look at him. Not the Food Network legend, not the loud personality. Just a man who cares deeply about what's happening outside the studio walls. And that alone made this clash one people won't forget anytime soon.